Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Lands, One Gospel. I am Marchjaun. My co host is Karen. Today, we are going to do something different. Usually, when we're doing this Jude series that we're actually finishing off today, we're going to start by reading the passage and then discussing the passage. But today, we're going to do things differently because there's a different kind of conversation to be had. So, I put up the passage on the screen for you to see what it is. But we're going to jump right into the discussion because this passage is talking about the church being infiltrated and people attacking the church. And Jude is saying, even though he wanted to discuss the gospel, he couldn't because he needed to discuss how to defend the gospel. And then he went into this long explanation of what kind of people these false teachers and infiltrators are. Not really what they taught or what they did, but what to look out for, the kind of person. And now he is starting to discuss what we are supposed to do. But he isn't really looping back to this is how you defend the gospel. So as we are reading this passage, we need to ask ourselves, but how do we defend the gospel then? And that is what we're going to ask today. Like, let's assume our churches are infiltrated, or we have been in a church that was infiltrated, or our church will be infiltrated. Because either way, we are going to have one of those experiences coming up for us soon. And it sucks, and it happens more often than we think. And Karen, that is where you're going to pick up because you have a story like this, don't you?
Yes, I have one. Yeah, so I was like first thinking in how Jude it's like he's like giving like a lot of importance to be aware of what happening in our churches. Because he was like, you are going to live this. You are going to face these kind of things in that time, but also in our time. So I was thinking like how we can be aware of that. And I was like thinking in my when my church was like kind of a split. So I was like, no, I was 17 years old. I was 17 years old. So it was a girl. It was a girl. So, in that age, maybe I don't know the other young people, but in that age you're like not too much near from God. I will say that you don't have like this hard relationship because I didn't read my Bible every day. I went to the church, I was serving in the church, but I don't have like this strong relationship with God. But I was like thinking how I was aware of that. So I was 17 years old and I was hearing the message, I was going to the classes, I was serving the church, and yeah. So in that moment my siblings and I were like so involved because we were part of the teenagers team or class. I don't know. But there was like a really good friendship in that group, and we were like all Saturdays we were together, we go out together, we were like it was like really good. But suddenly many things start happen, and of course for my siblings and I, my parents never aware us. They never say like we are going to stop going to the church, we are going to do this. They never tell us anything of what they are living behind what they, I will say, like the perfect image, because maybe they want to take care about our heart or spiritual, but also how the way that we are looking at the leaders. So my siblings and I never received like any information about what was happening. So we continue our lives, I will say that, because it was like a long time. We continue with our lives, kind of, and suddenly my siblings and I were like listening things strange, and the message in the Sundays were weird. I will say that. But okay, we were like okay because we will see our parents like just there listening, and we started like looking what is happening. But I was like thinking, like, yeah, when I was 17 years, it's something that really hard to me because I lose a lot of people. Also, my best friend, and it was like so hard for me. It was like a big lose because it's the church where you grow up when you where you were rising. My grandmother was part of the church, and I see my grandmother working in the church, then my grandmother, and then my parents, and then me and my siblings and I being part of all of this work, and it's hard. It's hard, but I was like thinking like if I wasn't be part of the church, if I wasn't go to the activities, if I wasn't put attention to what I was preaching, if I just go as because it's Sunday and I have to go, maybe I don't realize of what was happening, you know? And even when my parents don't tell anything to us, my siblings and I say like something is happening. This is not okay. This is not what the church is supposed to be. So in that moment when my siblings and I realized, we were like, so what is going to happen? And after that, in that way, it was like the problem with the pastor. So even there was like a huge problem with the pastor and the group of the teens. So in that moment, my parents are like, okay, yeah, now we are going to tell you what happened because, and then we realized and it was like, yeah, there was like so much to happening here. But Jude is saying like, you have to be aware. But if you are not involved in the church, if you are not involved in this good relationship with God, you will never look of what is happening, and you never be aware when someone new arrive with a different uh, doctrine, with different practices, and you will just adopt, and you will never. And then, of course, destroy to the church and split the church as consequence of that. But yeah, that was part of the story that I live.
Okay, so this is making me think when reading Jude and you see this discussion happening of what to look out for in bad teachers, which we're not going to rehash. I think we spent a lot of time on that. So the next question is where we're getting today like, okay, now I'm a grown up in the church. Now I'm defending the gospel. And Jude does give a lot of tips how, but I first want to go a bit more personal with you here. And now I want to ask, like, when you were a kid and you were in a situation like that, you were completely dependent on everyone around you and you didn't really understand what was happening and stuff. But let's say as an adult, things like that would happen. And now you're one of the responsible people in the church. What would you
Yeah.
say you'll do differently now?
Okay. So what I see in in my church, it's like it was. I will say it was one of the principal Baptist church here. I will not say the whole name because you will look. It was one of the principal churches here. So when someone new arrived to here to Toluca, it was like, I will look for the principal one here. And we as a church, we receive a lot of people from another parts people because if you are foreign, you look for this church and you will arrive there because it's like the reference. So there were like new people coming from out. Then there were a lot of people that were signed as a member of the church. But the I will say like the it was like a lot of people actually, but they were like signed that yes, I am member of the church, but they never come from the of in Sundays. They just came when it was Christmas or or the Holy Week. How to say in, yeah, the, the when we
Like
remember the death of
Lent or
Christ.
Pentecost.
Yes, kind of, yeah. So there were like specific dates when they were like, oh, there's a church and I will go to the to the event of the end of the year. So there were like a group of people that we were part of the church. We were serving there. We were living there because I used to be all the week in the church. I was in the prayer nights. I was in the chorus. I was in the, yeah. I was missionary in that church because I went to Cuba when I was 15 years old. So how, I would say, how the strategic works. So the leaders start noticing, and they say like, no, we have to talk with the pastor. They went to the pastor, and the pastor said, no, I will not quit. This is my church and I will stay here forever. It was like that. And actually, after the first, as the first request, there started happening like a lot of things that everyone can see it, like the tension. You see it like you go to the Sundays and it's like, what happening here? Okay. But after that, the strategic of the pastor was to go to every person that were signed in the list of the members of the church, of course, the ones that never came to the church. And he started visiting one by one by one by one by one by one by one. So there was a meeting here in the church to ask again the pastor to quit. When we arrived to the church, there was all the people that never came in the year, they came. And they support the pastor and say like, no, he's not going to quit. So these people just stay there. They say like, I will say the pastor is not going to quit, so you are going to the ones that go away. So that's what happened. So all the leaders, all the teachers, all just we just go out. And I was like thinking, why the pastor do that? Because of course the people that never came to the church, they really never see anything strange. They never hear anything strange in the preachers. Any strange in the team's group. They never be aware of that, and that's something that it was stuck to me because I was like so angry because I was like, he never came. What is doing here? And it was like that was a strategic. So as an adult, we have to take care about that relationship. Because of course someone can call us and tell us like, no, this is what is happening and we need to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And we're like, oh yes, yes, yes. But if we don't have that part with God, we are going also to be part of the destruction. You know, MJ, it was strange. Of course. Of course, that people that just came that Sunday, they will never come back. But the destruction was already happened. So I would say like it's hard, but we as a members of the church, we as the sons of God, we have to take care about our relationship with God. Because yes, one person can just arrive to tell you liars, and you're going to, oh yes, I trust in you. You will never get wisdom of God. You will never receive direction of God, and you're going to follow one person, and you're going to be part of the destruction. And yeah, I would say like as an adult, you have to be conscious about your relationship with God, your relationship also with the church, and how you have been part of the church.
Yes, I think taking up responsibility is definitely one of the first steps you need to take. Like, you're not just a consumer of the church, you are part of the church. The church is your responsibility as well. And especially in the Baptist, because you are like communal church polity. So it's very
Yes.
important. Now, when I think of the first time I experienced something like this, I was about 13, 14-ish. And the pastor we had at that point, he didn't preach any false things. He just was very strict and conservative, and he didn't have good people skills. So he made people upset, and people left just because he wasn't a very nice person. But I remember one of the things that I noticed is that he chased someone out of my Sunday school class because he wasn't wearing a tie, and he wanted all of the boys to wear ties to Sunday school. Which now thinking back, I'm like, man, what nonsense! I would have been upset as well. But but yeah, so I in my experience, usually in my denomination, because we're a very small Afrikaans denomination, so doesn't really it's easy to keep track of everyone, what everyone is saying. So the moment someone starts preaching something odd, you know about it. But the problem seems to be the relationships a lot of the times with leaders. There I'll say, like, a good leader isn't just someone who teaches the truth. It's always someone who leads in truth. You can
Yeah.
guide other people, you can grow other people. So that is what I think Jude is getting at, because I see three solutions that Jude is explaining. So the first one is to build yourself up or keep yourself in love. You can characterize it like that. And then there is the grace towards the ones who are weak and maybe even doing sin. And the last part, I think the last two closing verses is very important, because that's putting the point like Christ is the only one who can keep you from falling. It's not your pastor, it's not how good you are, but yet he gives us the responsibility to do it. So it's like everything else in the spiritual life. Rely on Christ, he is the only one, but you still have a responsibility. So if I think about the build yourself up in love and pray in the Holy Spirit and all that kind of stuff, that's basic spiritual growth. You need to grow up as a Christian. You're not
Yes.
supposed to be a child just going along with things. Like in your story, you yourself said you didn't know what was really happening, you just followed along. When that thing was happening in my church, I also didn't understand what's happening. I just went along. And for a child, that's acceptable, for a teenager. But if you're an adult and you're like we are, the old people in the church by now, the experienced people, the people who are supposed to teach and lead the children and take part in church and doing the ministries and stuff. It's like, if something's happening in your church that's not right and you are not aware of it, you are not awake. You're asleep as a Christian. And that's why I think
Yes.
the Bible often tells us to wake up, look at what's happening around you, observe, be aware. So if I would say what I learned in my life about how to avoid these situations and how to work against the indoctrination, because mine wasn't really theological, it was more personal. So I'll say what I learned is having good teaching is one thing. Knowing how to say the right things, knowing how to speak beautifully and eloquently, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. The pastor should be able to do it. But you should also live accordingly. You should also deal with people in the way that you preach. If you're preaching, love your brothers, but in the meantime, you can barely keep a conversation without upsetting someone or getting into an argument, are you really living the love? Are you really supposed to be a teacher? Are you really supposed to be a leader? So I'm looking for someone who doesn't just have the truth, someone who just have good theology. In a leader, I'm also looking for someone who actually has a lifestyle of truth, who has a life transformed by Christ. Not just knowing how to talk about it, but actually living it actively daily. Do you
Yeah. So I was I was like thinking like about, for me, on my team of the teens, there were like there were like a few teens that were facing all this through, and now they are not in the church, and they are now, yeah, they're just living there with any kind of faith, any kind of nothing. And and it's sad, MJ, because at the end of the day, we were like friends, learning and growing together in God's love. And suddenly one person destroyed that relation and the future relationship with God. So yes, as now as an adult, as leaders of our church, we have the responsibility to be aware of all these things, MJ. And yeah, Jude is saying like, yeah, your responsibility as a personal responsibility is because you have to build yourselves up. You have to take care. Yes, you have leaders, you have a pastor, you have teachers, but your principal responsibility comes from you. You have to build up. You have to continue learning. You have to continue seeking and look for, if your pastor says something, you can go to the Bible and you can ask, you can do a lot. Right now we have like a lot of things, a lot of resources where we can seek um, the interpretations and more opinions, and we can do that, right? But we have to take care, because now as an adult, now as part of the church, there's behind us, there's new people that is going to begin to grow in, and it's the beginning of the new generation, and we have to be part. Yeah, we have to take care of our own responsibilities. And Jude is saying like, but also you have to pray, because you have also to pray, not just like, God, thanks for my day and bless my next day. Not in that way, just. He's saying like, have these moments of prayer to seek God, to seek direction, to seek wisdom, to seek, yeah, that you can open your eyes on this part. So he's like um telling us that part. Like, do it because you have a responsibility. So maybe on our daily Christian's life, there will be mistakes because we are going to face it. We can take bad decisions, and we are going to, yeah, to make mistakes, right? But Jude is saying like, yeah, but the mistake, okay, it happened, but the problem will be happen when there is not a deep spiritual formation, right? Because if we don't have this, if we make a mistake, we can, how to say, fix it,
Can cover it up.
of cover up. But if there's something more huge, the problem that will happen when there's any deep spiritual formation.
Yes. And I think there is a difference between someone making mistake and someone being false and someone infiltrating the church. Like every Christian is going to do sin. Every Christian is going to do something wrong. Every one of us is going to interpret something wrong and teach something that's not true. It's unavoidable because we are limited humans, but it's different when someone's doing it on purpose. It's different when someone is realizing, but wait, I'm wrong, but I'm going to keep doing what is wrong. So I think what Jude is saying, like in the next part, where it's those who are weak, those who are busy with sin, grab them out of the fire. It's a pretty
Yeah.
intense image. Like here's this person burning in the fire like a stick, and You have to pull the stick out of the fire as quickly as possible to save that person so they don't burn up.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
man, you can so easily ruin not just your church, but your own life with being involved in all kinds of sins and dodgy situations. But also, on the other side, yes, help those who are weak. But when it comes to the leaven, which Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 5, when it's those false teachers, those people who are purposefully doing sin, who are busy ruining the church, he says you need to remove them. You can't allow them in the church. And Paul even go as far as to say you throw them out on the street so the
Throwing
Satan
out the
can get
streets,
hold of them.
get hold of them.
And
And
then you get to the last part of 1 Corinthians 5, and he is talking about the reason for why we do discipline. Why do we go as far as to throw people out of the church who are like really stuck in sin and really doing bad things? And he says it's for their own salvation. So they can miss the community, so they can realize what they've lost and return to what they want to be, where they want to be. And I think here is the problem why church discipline doesn't work. It's because there is no real community anymore. And this I've noticed is a problem across denominations, across cultures, across countries. Right? So because there's so many churches, if this church upsets me, I just go across the street to a different church. And if you walk into a church and you look at how people are treating each other and greeting and stuff, it's like most of them don't really know each other. Most of them never testified to each other. Most of them never built into each other's lives. And I think that's a huge thing about building yourselves up in love. Because when you go to Ephesians with the threefold or fourfold ministry, and he says there are some, you know, the pastors, the evangelists, and the the prophet or whatever, then he says those gifts are given, those positions, so that the body can build themselves up in the holy faith. And I think this is the same thing that Jude is touching on, that we are supposed to build ourselves. That's only going to happen in community where everyone is using the gifts that they were given, where everyone is taking up their responsibility, where everyone cares about the other person and is an actual community being built that is growing together up towards Christ.
Yes. And I was thinking about the part of the discipline, MJ, because sometimes when we are talking about discipline, it's like, you are a sinner. Go and sit down over there. Don't be part of, of what is happening in the church. And Jude is not saying us that. He's like, you have to keep yourself in love, in the love of God. He's not saying us like reject the people that are connecting, that are doing sin. He's not saying us that. And I was like thinking like, because if we think more deeper about these people, they are like maybe facing things. And if we don't have this love and we don't have this love of the community, what are we going to do is to go and sit down over there, stay there, just listen, just be there. And and I was like thinking like, if you know someone that has problems with the sin, what you have to do is to take care about him, about her. I don't know. And I was like, how we can do that? We can make a phone call. We can pray together. We can, hey, how you doing? We are going to and that we can share this kind of love that Jude is telling us, because we are going to no, we have the responsibility to take care also for this life, because he say like, take, how to say it in Jude,
Pluck them out
from
of
the
the fire.
yeah, but it's a radical word, it's not like, just give it a hand and walk with him and through the, no, he's like, hey, you have to actively actively doing that part of the love. And So he's like saying like you have to keep yourself in the love of God, but it doesn't mean, and something that maybe we are going to have like different thoughts about this, but he's not saying like, oh, you are going to lose God's love, right? He's not saying that. Like, it doesn't mean that we need to be in this way just through earning God's love. He's not saying that. Like, but he is reminded that our lives has to be in active obedience and in active trust while we are waiting to for Christ's mercy. Sorry. So he's giving us like key points in there of how we have to do this part to be a Christian, that have to be aware of what is happening in the church, but also what is happening in the lives of our community in love. Sorry.
Yeah, I think when it gets to the love thing in Jude, it's very interesting that he starts off with, you are in the love of Christ. And the Greek there is worded in such a way that you are in his love and you will always remain in his love. But then he gets to this passage where it's like, keep yourself in the love. So now we ask ourselves, why does he say in the same short letter that you are in God's love forever, but now you have to keep yourself in God's love? And I think the problem here is because just look at marriage today. People fall out of love and stuff so quickly, and like everyone seems to divorce at least 7 times recently. But
That's
that's
overrated.
that's not how Christ works. If Christ says that he loves you, he loves you. He's not going to fall out of love like with you and all of these weird things that we have today. So when Christ forms that bond with you, that contract, which the author of Hebrews explains that we are absorbed into his family, now we are brothers. We are co-workers of Christ. You're never going to fall back from that. But you have a responsibility to maintain that relationship. So in Jude's sense, you have a church that is united with Christ in the love. But it's possible for this church to move away from the love, to move away from the relationship. And that's what happened to the church in Laodicea in Revelation, where you find Christ standing outside of the door of the church, knocking at the church door, saying, like, let me come inside. I want to feast with you. That's a church. Those are believers, but Christ is outside of the church. And that is what we have to prevent from moving outside of that love. So we have to stay in that good relationship with Christ, a church always under him. So if we start doing sin, we're starting to move away. If we start preaching a false message, we start moving away. If we do not care for each other as a church, we start moving away. And if you take that fire image, like we're moving out of the love of Christ into the fires of the world where it's dangerous and we can fall into sin and all kinds of terrible things can happen, and churches has been ruined because of this. We have to pluck the people out of the fire, bring them back into the love, like stop your sin. And this is not an image of talking softly to someone. This is way more intense. In Hebrews, you have this image of, as you see the day coming nearer, don't neglect your gatherings like some people have the habit, but motivate one another to attend the gatherings. Now, that motivation word there is to motivate people in anger. Now, imagine someone just inviting you to church, like sending you a Facebook link or something like, come visit church. And someone motivating you with anger to go to church, like your dad on a Sunday morning when you were still in school and too lazy to get out of bed, and he's like throwing up your bedroom door and he's screaming at you, yeah, he's like, get ready now. It's like you don't have a choice, you are going to come. And that's how we are supposed to motivate each other to take part of this community that we have.
Yeah, and I was now that I'm not sure about the anger. But something that Jude is mentioned is like he's giving like three response about how we're going to influence to these people and how we're going to, or how can we help them. And he said like, okay, you have to first show mercy. Show mercy for the ones that are doubting about their faith, doubting about going to the church, doubting about everything. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing good this word. Yeah. It sounds weird to me. Okay. But he's saying like you have to have this mercy, because of course there are people that maybe are not facing problems in the church, but they are maybe facing problems outside the church. And maybe in that problems, they start doubting about God's love, start doubting about the church, how the church work. They start doubting about many spiritual things. And we have to take care and have mercy for these people. Because yes, in our lives, we are going to do, because we are going to. But if we notice that in someone around our community, we just have to show mercy and try to bring. It's not going to be that for our work they are going to came back, but God can use our lives to take care of them and take care about their spiritual life and take care about also their doubts. And also he is saying like we have to save the others of the snatching them from the fire. And of course, as you say, he's saying like in more in an angry way, but in the way that he say like there are people that are losing their lives. There are people they will never hear about God. They will never hear the gospel. They will never come to the church. And your responsibility is to go and look for them, to go and preach them, to go and share the good news to their lives, because they need to be saved. They need God. They need to start living a new life in God. And yeah, there are people outside the church that they are losing their lives, and we can see every day. So our response, or the responsibility that Jude is also telling to us, is like, yes, now you are being a part of this church, you have your community, you are in I will say in a good shape spiritually talking. But he's also saying like, it's not just about you. It's not about that you are like, I'm fine here, I am receiving the word and have the Holy Spirit. And he's like it's not just about you. It's not just about that you are good, that you are fine. It's also about the people that it's outside the church that they are losing their lives. And the last part is like to show mercy with fear, hating even the garner starting by the sin. So also to be aware of what is happening about sin, and yeah, to be in this way. So this is powerful, because I will say with these three response, or to take care of these responsibilities, maybe no one will be influenced by a false doctrine. We are not going to be influenced in that way. So we can have a response over there.
It's actually really odd that as Christians, our entire faith is built on love and grace. And we constantly need to be reminded that, hey, care about your fellow Christian. Be grateful towards your fellow Christian. We tend to be really hard on each other, and, well, most of the time we don't care what our fellow Christian is doing. I don't know what they're up to in their daily lives. And if I know what they're up to, I start making all of these rules and systems they need to follow. And if they don't perform and don't fit, we are throwing them in the fire ourselves. So it's really odd that we are like this. And I think that is why it's important where Jude ends. That, like a New Testament letter always closes, it's to God be the glory, Christ our Savior and stuff. But he's also pointing there towards Christ as the only one who is capable of keeping us from falling. Yeah. We can minister to each other, we can love each other, we can care for each other, but we're not going to keep each other from falling. We can create an environment ideal for standing, but we can't make people stand.
Yeah.
And it's that old Sunday school joke where every time the Sunday school teacher asks something and he says, no, it's Jesus. It's because of Jesus. And it's like, that's the ultimate cheat question in Christianity. Like, how are we going to stand? No, Jesus. How are we going to defend the gospel? Focus on Jesus. How are we going to avoid false teachers? Focus on Jesus. How are we going to help our fellow brothers who are in sin? And it's focus on Jesus. How did Jesus do it?
Mhm.
And I think that's an important thing that we always have to keep in mind. Like, what did Christ say? What did Christ teach? How did Christ live?
Yeah.
And oddly enough, when you read the Gospels, you don't find Jesus in church or in the temple just talking to the Levites and the Pharisees and the lawyers. You find him in streets. You find him talking to the bad people that we're not supposed to talk to, like prostitutes and drunkards and tax collectors. That's the kind of people that Christ mixed
Yes.
with. When you look at Jesus' disciples, they weren't the perfect image of the perfect ministers. Like, if I read Peter's story, I think to myself, what a fool this guy was. Like, really, this is the person who Jesus chose? And whenever I start thinking like that, I just have to look at myself and I'm like, compared to Peter, Peter is starting to look like a real saint because I do even more stupid things. I turn my back on Christ very easily once it starts getting uncomfortable. And I constantly rely on people to help me, to motivate me, to keep me on the right path, because alone I won't make it. And ultimately, all of this is because we're a body built up in Christ. And Christ is the one who's keeping us from falling.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, now that you're turning back to Jesus' image, I would say, like, at the end of the day, yeah, we're going to receive instructions, because at the end of the day, the book of Jude, it's instruction, it's awareness. But at the end of the day, all these kind of examples are relying in Jesus' image, in Jesus' ministry. So in that way, I would say, like, Jesus always showed this gentle instruction to the people that need it. He never, when someone needed to any instruction or anything or any question, he always showed this gentle instruction to them. And of course, when someone needs confrontation, he was like, he was not like, it doesn't matter, they will learn. Like, it was like an urgency. Like, Jesus always showed this urgency for confrontation for the people that need the confrontation. They don't need like to do like, oh, leave them, they will see and they will learn alone. No, 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 no. And in that way, I will say, like, yeah, maybe in a little bit of anger, but he made this confrontation. And of course, he always showed this compassion for the people that need him. And I will say, like, at the end of the day, our answer will be always how Jesus done, how Jesus be with all these people, how Jesus being with his community, because also he was part of a community, how people be with the people inside the church, and how he was with the people outside of the church. And at the end of the day, Jude remind us, look at Jesus, look at his example of followed in that way.
Yeah, so Jude goes through this very long process of how do we defend the faith? How do we defend the gospel? And he goes through explaining what a false teacher looks like, what an infiltrator looks like. And then he gives this practical example of pray, build yourself up in love. Help the people who are weak and are busy with sin, save them from it. It's your responsibility. And he's building up towards Christ. Like, we need to take up our responsibility and be proper images of Christ in this world, to represent him in a proper way, to share his message in a proper way. if we look at who we follow, we don't follow people we like, people who look and sound good. We follow people who show Christ, who talk about Christ. If we think about how we serve in the church, we serve so that people can be built up towards Christ. So people can walk the road of spiritual growth or sanctification. All of those words can be used there. So ultimately, it's walk the road of Christ. And it's such a cheat answer, because that's the answer to most questions in the Bible. Like, how do I live a holy life? No, follow Jesus. How do I witness to people? Just talk to people like Jesus did. How do I defend the gospel? Live like Christ. Become like him. And I think that's a very fitting way for Jude to end this letter, because the letter was so complicated and he went through all these weird things in Enoch and all of these abstract imagery, and in the end it's just like, oh, but trust Jesus, he's the only one capable of keeping you standing.
Yeah, but I guess like Jude was like thinking like, I need to remember them what they will facing, but of course I will also remember them in where they have to rely on. Like as we say, like if we don't know our story, if we don't know what happened before, we are going to repeat it, and then we be aware of that. So I would say like Jude was like maybe like, hey, you have to remember that you do this and this and this and this and the blah 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 blah, and this will think. So this is like the situations that you're going to face. But also, if you don't have to take care of this and this, you will. So he was like, yeah, telling like a hard story and maybe difficult to understand, because for me, I would say like this is the first time that I read Jude intentional. So for me, like the reading of the book was like, now I have to read more about this because I don't know what he's saying up here. But I guess like Jude was really, really, his intention was like, look where you begin, look where you come from, and look what Jesus wants to do, and look what Jesus is helping you to live in this way, because he's the only one. He's the only one. We have to follow his paths. We have to follow his examples, because if we follow this, we can show love. We can continue grow, build up ourselves. We can have this communion with the Holy Spirit. We are going to live in love through God for all people. We are going to show mercy. We are going to be the ones that go out and show the gospel and share the gospel with the people, because that's how Jesus done before.
I think that's actually a good place to end, because anything else we're going to say is just going to go back into this loop. Look at Jesus.
Yes. Look at Jesus.
Okay.
Always Jesus, 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 Jesus.
Now we sound like true reformers and Protestants.
Yes.
I think that's a good place to end. So until next time.
Hey, welcome to our explainer. You know, when we hear that phrase, defending the faith, our minds probably jump to arguments, debates, having all the right answers. But what if the strongest, most powerful defense isn't about what we say at all, but about how we live? Today, we're diving into how a truly transformed life becomes its own unshakable testimony. And this quote right here, it gets to the very heart of what we're looking at, pulling from the short but incredibly potent book of Jude. The whole idea is this: the best defense of our faith isn't some perfectly worded argument, but a life that has been genuinely and visibly changed by the gospel. That life, well, it speaks for itself. So here's our game plan. First up, we're going to pinpoint the exact threat Jude was warning about. Then, we'll get into his strategy for building a faith that can withstand anything. From there, we'll see how that strength turns into a mission of mercy. We'll also uncover our ultimate source of protection. And finally, we'll look at a powerful, real-world example of what this kind of faith actually looks like in action. Okay, so what's fascinating right off the bat is that Jude isn't warning about some big, scary threat from the outside, like persecution from the Roman Empire. No, he's sounding an alarm about something way more sneaky and honestly more dangerous: people inside the church who are creating chaos and division. Jude basically tells his readers, hey, remember the apostles told you this was going to happen? These scoffers, as he calls them, weren't just asking honest questions. They were actively tearing the church apart. They acted like they were on some higher spiritual level, but Jude cuts right through it. He says they were really just following their own selfish urges, and, this is the key, they did not have the Spirit. So how do you fight a fire that started inside your own house? Well, Jude's answer is just brilliant. Before you go trying to confront everyone else, you have to secure your own foundation. He's teaching us that the absolute best defense against bad teaching is a good, strong, healthy spiritual life of your own. Let's look at the steps he lays out. Jude gives us 4 crystal clear commands that really are the bedrock of a resilient faith. Build, pray, keep, and wait. And look, these aren't just gentle suggestions. They're active, ongoing things we have to do. They're like the 4 pillars that keep the whole structure standing firm when the ground starts to shake. Now, when Jude says to build yourselves up in your most holy faith, what does that actually mean? It's really important to get this. He isn't talking about your own personal feelings or mystical experiences. He's talking about the solid, objective truth of the gospel. The core beliefs and teachings passed down directly from the apostles. It's the foundation we build on, not something we make up as we go. And this brings us to a really crucial point. You can think of your faith as having 2 parts, right? There's the religion of the head, the stuff you know intellectually, your theology. And then there's the religion of the heart, how you actually live, pray, and worship. Jude's whole message is that a truly strong defense needs both. Building on that most holy faith means you let what's in your head completely transform how your heart lives, day in and day out. So once we shored up our own foundation, Jude immediately shifts our focus outward. He says defending the faith isn't about hiding in a spiritual bunker. It's an active, compassionate, full-on rescue mission. After we've taken care of our own spiritual health, we have a job to do for those around us who are in real danger. And he gets so practical here, identifying 3 different groups of people. First, you've got those who are just starting to doubt, who are wavering. With them, we need to be merciful and patient. Second, there are those who are already caught in the trap and are in immediate danger. For them, the language is intense. We are to snatch them from the fire. And third, for those who are deeply entangled in sin, we still show mercy, but with a sense of serious caution, hating the sin itself, but loving the person. It's a really smart, compassionate strategy. All right, so after laying out all this human responsibility, build, pray, keep, rescue, Jude does something incredible. He just pivots and reminds us where our real security and power come from. And this leads to the amazing climax of his entire letter. I mean, let's be real, the danger Jude is talking about is no joke. The risk of stumbling, of failing gnarly, of being led down the wrong path, it's a constant pressure. And I think admitting that weakness, recognizing that danger, is exactly what makes this next part so incredibly powerful and comforting. Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling. Wow, what a promise. And listen to the language here, it's so cool. Back in verse 21, Jude told us to keep ourselves in God's love. That word means to watch over or attend to. But the word for keep here in verse 24 is different. It means to guard, like a soldier. So here's the takeaway. While we have a responsibility to tend to our spiritual lives, it is God's power, and God's power alone, that is the ultimate guard that keeps us from truly falling. Okay, so what does a person actually look like who has built their foundation, who is on a mission of mercy, and who is ultimately being guarded by God? Well, for a perfect case study, we just have to look at the Apostle Paul, especially when he was imprisoned, which he writes about in the book of Philippians. This is just mind-blowing. Paul is literally in chains. Most of us would see that as a complete and utter failure, right? The end of the road. But Paul saw it in a completely different light. He saw his prison cell as God's brilliant strategic move to get the gospel message into the Praetorian Guard. These were the emperor's elite bodyguards, people he never could have reached any other way. This famous line is the key that unlocks his whole perspective. Paul was so grounded in that most holy faith we talked about that his view of life and death was totally flipped upside down. To him, living just meant more time to serve Jesus. And dying, well, that meant he got to be with Jesus. It was a win-win, which completely freed him from the kind of fear and despair that would paralyze almost anyone else. So when he's weighing that choice, living or dying, why does he want to stick around? It's not for himself. He says it's more necessary for your sake. He's talking to the Philippian believers. His entire motivation was a selfless, merciful mission to build up other people in their faith, which is a perfect picture of Jude's call to care for others.
Now this might be the most radical part of all. Paul knew that some people were preaching the gospel out of some pretty nasty motives, like envy and rivalry, just trying to make his life in prison even worse. And his response? He celebrated it. He rejoiced. Why? Because the most important thing was that Christ was being proclaimed. His own personal comfort, his reputation, none of that mattered as much as the gospel going forward. Now that is a faith that defends itself.
And that question brings us right back to where we began. It's pretty easy for our lives to just state our beliefs, like a list of facts on a website. But Jude and the incredible example of Paul, they call us to so much more. They call us to a life that is so transformed, so built up, so merciful, and so focused on Jesus that our very existence becomes the most powerful and compelling defense of the faith we claim to have.